The afternoon sun cast a warm glow on the small city street as a quiet man walked toward a popular bar. His name was Ethan Cross, though no one there would recognize it. He wore a faded jacket, worn-out shoes, and a simple cap that covered most of his face. To anyone passing by, he looked like just another tired worker stopping for a drink after a long day. But what nobody knew was that Ethan was the owner of that very bar, one of the most successful businessmen in town. He had built this place years ago from nothing, starting with a small idea and a dream. Over time, the bar had become one of the busiest in the area, always filled with music, laughter, and people enjoying themselves. Yet lately something had been bothering him. He had received a few quiet complaints about the staff, how some customers were treated differently depending on how they looked or dressed. Ethan didn't want to believe it, but deep down he feared it might be true. So today he decided to find out for himself. He wanted to see how his people behaved when the boss wasn't watching. He didn't want a special welcome or fake smiles. He wanted honesty. When he stepped inside, the music was soft and the smell of roasted coffee and baked bread filled the air. The lights were gentle, and people laughed quietly at their tables. But when some of the staff noticed him, their smiles faded just a little. They looked him up and down, the old jacket, the dusty shoes, and quickly looked away. To them, he seemed like someone who didn't belong in such a nice place. Ethan quietly chose a corner seat near the window, far from the crowd. He didn't ask for attention. He just wanted to watch. After a few minutes, a young woman walked toward him with a notepad in her hand. She had kind eyes, tied-back hair, and a warm smile that reached her face even after what looked like a long shift. Her name tag read Lena. "Good afternoon, sir," she said softly. "What can I get you today?" Ethan looked up. Her voice carried no judgment, no coldness. "Just a coffee," he said, "and maybe a sandwich if it's not too much trouble." "Not at all," Lena replied, smiling. "Would you like brown bread or white?" "Brown's fine," he said, trying to keep his disguise calm and simple. As she walked away, Ethan noticed something. Some of the other waiters standing by the counter whispering. One of them snickered, glancing at him. He heard a few words like cheap order and wrong place. Ethan's chest tightened a bit, but he stayed silent. He wanted to see who among them worked with heart, not for tips or appearances. A few minutes later, Lena returned with his coffee. The smell was strong and fresh. She placed it carefully on the table, along with a neatly wrapped sandwich. "Here you go," she said kindly. "If you need anything else, please call me." "Thank you," Ethan said, his eyes studying her every move. She gave him a warm nod and walked off to serve another table, still smiling. He watched her work for the next 20 minutes. No matter who came in, a couple dressed fancy, a tired old man, or a group of noisy youngsters, Lena treated everyone the same. She didn't rush the poor or flatter the rich. Her words were gentle, her service honest. Ethan felt something shift inside him. He remembered the early days when he had started this place. Back then, every customer was treated like family, but over the years, as success grew, maybe some of that kindness had been lost. Watching Lena, Ethan realized that simple kindness was worth more than any profit. Then something small but powerful happened. A little boy sitting with his father dropped his glass of juice. It spilled across the floor. The father looked embarrassed and began apologizing. Before he could finish, Lena was already there with a towel and a smile. "It's okay," she said cheerfully. "Accidents happen." She cleaned up the mess and even brought the boy another drink, free of charge. The boy's face lit up, and so did his father's. Ethan couldn't stop smiling to himself. That one act told him more than any report or complaint ever could. It wasn't about the drink, it was about respect, compassion, and the way one person could make another's day a little better. When Lena returned to check on his table, Ethan asked quietly, "You seem to really care about your work." She laughed softly. "I try, sir. People come here to relax. Sometimes a kind word can change someone's whole day." Ethan nodded. "You're right." He looked down at his plain clothes and then back at her. "Not everyone would treat me this kindly." Lena blinked, a little surprised. "Why wouldn't I? You're a customer, and that's what matters." Her answer was simple, but it struck him deeply. As he sipped his coffee, Ethan thought, "She doesn't know who I am, yet she treats me with more respect than most people who know my name." When he finished his meal, he watched her one last time before quietly leaving. The day had given him more answers than he expected. He had seen the truth. Some staff had lost their way, but one waitress still carried the heart that built his dream. And in that moment, Ethan Cross made a silent decision. Tomorrow he would return, not as a stranger, but as the man behind the name. The next morning, the bar opened early. The smell of fresh bread filled the air and soft music played in the background. Lena, the same waitress who had served Ethan the day before, was already there before sunrise. She cleaned every table carefully, humming a quiet tune to herself. Her eyes looked a little tired, but her smile never faded. Lena lived a simple life. She shared a small apartment with her younger brother, Tom, who was still in school. Their parents had passed away years ago, so Lena worked hard to take care of him. She didn't have much, but she always found reasons to be grateful, like a new day, a kind customer, or even a cup of warm tea during her short breaks. While most of the other staff complained about long hours and small tips, Lena stayed cheerful. She believed that every person who walked through those doors carried a story. Maybe they were tired, lonely, or just needed someone to smile at them. She always wanted to be that smile. That morning, as she wiped the counter, she thought about the quiet man from yesterday, the one with the old jacket and kind eyes. He had thanked her politely and left without a fuss. Something about him had stayed in her heart. He seemed gentle, yet there was sadness behind his calm look. She hoped he was okay. Just as she finished setting the tables, the manager walked in, giving quick instructions. "We'll have a busy day," he said sharply. "Keep things fast. No time for long chats." Lena nodded respectfully, but deep inside she believed kindness should never be rushed. A few hours later, the bar filled with people. Office workers stopped by for lunch. A group of college friends laughed near the window, and a couple argued softly in the corner. The place was alive again. Lena moved from table to table with graceful speed, keeping her gentle smile intact. Then the door opened quietly, and in walked Ethan. He looked the same as before, same plain jacket, same simple shoes. He still carried that peaceful but serious look. Lena noticed him right away and smiled warmly. "Good afternoon, sir," she greeted. "Nice to see you again." Ethan nodded, surprised that she remembered him. "Good afternoon," he said. "Just a coffee again, please." "Of course," she replied cheerfully. "Would you like the same sandwich too?" He smiled faintly. "Yes, thank you." She walked off, and Ethan leaned back in his chair. He had returned to continue observing, still pretending to be broke. But more than that, he was curious about Lena. There was something honest about her that made him wonder what kept her so kind in a world that often wasn't. While waiting, he noticed how some of the other waiters reacted to him again. A few whispered under their breath, smirking as they passed. They thought he was a man who didn't belong in such a nice bar. Ethan stayed quiet, pretending not to hear, but he made note of everything. Moments later, Lena came back with his order. She placed the cup gently on the table and said, "I made sure the coffee's fresh. The last pot wasn't warm enough." Ethan smiled softly. "You pay attention to little things." "It's the little things that make people come back," she replied with a small grin. He stirred his coffee slowly, then asked, "You always this kind to everyone?" Lena laughed lightly. "I try. I think the world gives back what we send out. If we're kind, kindness finds a way back." Her simple words hit him harder than she knew. For years, Ethan had worked with people who spoke only of profits, growth, and money. But this waitress, this woman who earned just enough to survive, understood something deeper. As the day went on, Ethan noticed another moment that revealed her heart. An elderly man entered, leaning on a cane. He looked nervous, searching for a seat. Most of the tables were full, and some waiters avoided eye contact. But Lena spotted him instantly. She hurried over, helped him to a seat, and even adjusted the chair so he could rest easily. "Would you like some water while you look at the menu?" she asked softly. The old man smiled in relief. "Thank you, dear. You're very kind." Lena didn't do it for attention. She didn't even notice Ethan watching. But he saw it all. Later, when she had a short break, Ethan spoke quietly. "You seem to really love your job," Lena smiled shyly. "It's not just a job for me, sir. People come here for food, but sometimes they leave with a lighter heart. That's worth more than tips." Her words made Ethan feel both proud and guilty. Proud because his bar had someone like her. Guilty because he hadn't been around to see it sooner. As the afternoon faded, Lena went back to her routine, clearing plates, refilling cups, helping new customers with the same gentle care. Ethan sat there for hours pretending to sip his coffee, lost in thought. He realized he wasn't just testing his staff anymore. He was learning from them, or rather from her. When it was time to leave, Ethan stood up and looked at her one last time. "Thank you again, Miss Lena," he said kindly. She smiled, wiping her hands on her apron. "You're always welcome here, sir. And if you ever need a warm meal but can't pay right away, don't worry. You can pay later." Her tone was sincere, without a trace of pity, only care. Ethan's heart tightened. He nodded slowly, holding back a smile. "That's very kind of you." As he stepped out of the bar, the evening sun painted the sky golden. Ethan walked down the street quietly, his mind full of thoughts. He had spent years surrounded by people who wanted something from him: money, power, recognition. But today, a humble waitress had given him something rare: genuine kindness without expecting anything in return. And deep inside, Ethan knew his test wasn't over yet. Tomorrow, he would raise the test higher. The morning sky was gray when Ethan Cross stepped out of his car, once again dressed in his old jacket and worn shoes. He looked at the reflection in the glass window of his bar and almost laughed at himself. A millionaire pretending to be broke, it sounded strange even to him. But there was something important about seeing the truth without the shine of money. He took a deep breath and walked inside. The smell of coffee filled the room, and the quiet chatter of early customers created a soft hum in the background. A few waiters glanced at him again, the same way as before, some with polite smiles, others with quiet judgment. But he wasn't here for them. His eyes searched for one face, and there she was, Lena, arranging fresh flowers on the counter. Her hair was tied back neatly, and though she looked tired, her smile hadn't changed. When she saw him, her face brightened. "Good morning, sir," she said happily. "Back again?" Ethan smiled. "Couldn't resist your coffee." Lena laughed lightly. "That's the best reason to return." She guided him to a seat near the window, just like before. "The usual?" she asked. "Yes," Ethan replied softly. "Coffee and a sandwich, please." As she walked away, Ethan thought about the plan forming in his mind. Today, he would test something deeper. Not just how Lena treated customers, but how she reacted to kindness, honesty, and struggle. When Lena returned with his order, Ethan ate slowly, watching the room quietly. It was a busy morning. More people, louder noise, and a rush of new customers. The waiters moved quickly, their smiles growing thinner as their patience faded. But Lena stayed the same. She never let her tone change, never lost her warmth. Then something unexpected happened. When Ethan reached into his pocket after finishing his meal, his face changed slightly. He patted both sides, checked again, and sighed. His wallet, on purpose, was not there.
He had left it at home exactly as he planned. Lena noticed immediately and walked over.
"Everything okay, sir?" she asked kindly. Ethan hesitated. I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I don't have my wallet. I must have left it somewhere." A few people sitting nearby turned to look. One of the waiters whispered something under his breath, loud enough for Ethan to hear. "Here we go again. Another one who eats and can't pay." Lena frowned slightly at the comment, then turned her full attention back to Ethan. "It's all right, sir," she said gently. "Don't worry about it." "I can come back tomorrow to pay," Ethan offered, still pretending to look embarrassed. Lena smiled softly. "That's fine. I believe you." Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "You trust me that easily?" She nodded. "Of course. Everyone forgets something sometimes. I can cover it for now." "You'll pay for my meal?" he asked, pretending to be surprised. "Yes," she said simply. "It's just a sandwich and coffee. It's not much. You can pay later when you can." Ethan didn't speak for a few seconds. He wasn't expecting her to say that. There was no hesitation in her tone, just kindness. He looked into her eyes and saw something real. Empathy. Not pity, not judgment. Just human care. When she walked away to serve another table, Ethan leaned back in his chair, lost in thought. Moments later, one of the other staff members came up to Lena, annoyed. "Why would you pay for him? You don't even know the guy." Lena looked at the worker calmly. "Because it's just a meal. Maybe he really forgot. If I were in his place, I'd hope someone would do the same for me." The worker shook his head. "You'll never get rich thinking like that." She smiled faintly. "Maybe not rich in money, she said softly, but maybe rich in peace. Ethan heard those words clearly, though he pretended not to. They touched him deeper than he expected. He stayed for a while longer, finishing his coffee slowly, thinking about her words. He had met people in suits who promised loyalty, but only cared for wealth. He had dealt with business partners who spoke kindly in meetings but harshly behind his back. Yet this simple waitress, who had almost nothing, understood what it meant to be truly wealthy. Before leaving, Ethan walked up to the counter. Lena was there, writing down new orders. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "For what?" she asked with a gentle smile. "For trusting me," he replied. "Not many people would have done that," Lena shrugged softly. "Trust is a choice, sir, and sometimes people just need one person to believe in them." Ethan smiled quietly, his heart heavy with gratitude. "You've given me something to think about," he said before turning to leave. As he stepped out into the cool air, he stopped at the doorway for a moment and looked back. Lena was helping another customer, laughing kindly as she poured coffee. She didn't know that her small act had just changed someone's life forever. Walking down the street, Ethan's mind buzzed with emotions. All his life he had measured people through success, status, and power. But today a single waitress had reminded him what truly mattered. Her kindness wasn't planned. It wasn't for a reward. It was real. He whispered to himself, "Money can build walls, but kindness builds bridges." Ethan decided that tomorrow he wouldn't come as the quiet stranger anymore. Tomorrow he would come as himself, the man behind the bar, the real owner. But this time not to test, but to thank. And as the sun began to set behind the tall buildings, he smiled for the first time in days. The smallest act, a simple meal paid with kindness, had spoken louder than all the words in his world of business. The next morning, the city streets buzzed with life. The sky was clear and golden, and the bar's glass windows shimmered under the sunlight. Inside, everything looked the same. Tables neatly arranged, music softly playing, and the smell of fresh coffee floating in the air. But today, something different was about to happen. When Ethan Cross stepped through the door, he didn't wear his old jacket or dusty shoes. This time, he wore a clean gray suit, simple but elegant. His hair was neatly combed, and his confident walk turned heads. For the first time in many days, he wasn't pretending. Today, he came as himself. The staff looked up in surprise. They didn't recognize him at first. Some whispered quietly, thinking a businessman or some investor had come in. No one guessed that the man now standing near the counter was their own employer, the real owner of the place. Ethan looked around the bar. Everything felt different from this angle. Yesterday he was invisible. Today people's eyes followed him, full of curiosity and respect. He smiled faintly to himself. It was already teaching him a lesson about how quickly people's behavior could change. And then he saw her. Lena, dressed in her clean uniform, tying her apron, looked up and froze for a second. Then her face broke into a warm smile. "Good morning, sir," she said cheerfully, not recognizing him yet. "Nice to see you again," Ethan smiled back. "Good morning, Lena, you remember me?" "Of course," she said, placing menus on a nearby table. "You're my regular customer now, the one who loves coffee and brown bread sandwiches." He chuckled softly. "You've got a good memory." "It's part of the job," she replied kindly. "Would you like the same order today?" "Yes," Ethan said. "The same as always." As she walked away to prepare his order, the manager, Mr. Collins, approached Ethan with a polite but nervous smile. "Good morning, sir," he greeted. "May I help you?" Ethan turned toward him, studying his face. "You're the manager here, right?" "Yes, sir," Collins replied quickly. "I've been managing this bar for 3 years." Ethan nodded slowly, his eyes calm but sharp. "Good, I'll need a word with you later, privately." The manager hesitated, confused. "Of course, sir," he said, bowing slightly before hurrying away. When Lena returned with his coffee and sandwich, she placed them gently in front of him. "Here you go," she said with her usual cheerful tone. "And about yesterday, don't worry about the bill. You can pay it whenever you have time." Ethan smiled warmly. "Actually, I came to settle that today." He reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and placed a few large bills on the table. Lena's eyes widened. "Sir, that's too much," she said quickly. "Your order isn't even close to that." "Keep the change," he said kindly. She shook her head immediately. "No, sir. I can't take that." It's too much for just a meal. Her refusal made Ethan's heart swell with pride. Even when offered more, she stayed honest and humble. He smiled softly. You really are one of a kind, Lena. She laughed shyly. I'm just doing my job, sir. Ethan's eyes softened. No, he said quietly. You're doing much more than that. When she walked away to serve another table, Ethan called for the manager. The man rushed over, wiping sweat from his forehead. Let's go to your office, Ethan said calmly. Inside the small office, the manager closed the door behind them. The room was filled with papers, files, and a large board showing monthly sales. Collins stood nervously by his desk, unsure what this serious-looking man wanted. Ethan took a seat and looked straight at him. You don't recognize me, do you? The manager frowned slightly, confused. I'm sorry, sir. Have we met before? Ethan smiled faintly. Yes, I've been here twice this week. Once dressed like a poor man. Once dressed like myself. The manager blinked, still not understanding. Then Ethan pulled out a small gold card with his name engraved on it. Ethan Cross, founder and owner. The color drained from the manager's face. Sir, Mr. Cross, I didn't know. Ethan raised his hand gently. Relax, I didn't come to fire you. I came to see the truth. And I did. The manager swallowed hard. Sir, if there was any problem, there was, Ethan interrupted calmly. The problem isn't the service or the food. It's the way some of your staff treat people they think are below them. Collins looked down, ashamed. I understand, sir. Ethan leaned back. Do you? Because I was that man. The one everyone whispered about. The one some of your staff mocked when they thought no one was listening. The room fell silent. Then Ethan's tone softened. But one of your waitresses, Lena, treated me with kindness. She didn't judge. She even offered to pay for my food when she thought I couldn't afford it. The manager's eyes widened in shock. She did? Ethan nodded. Yes, that young woman reminded me what this place was built on. Respect, warmth, and honesty. After a long pause, the manager spoke quietly. You're right, sir. We've lost that spirit over time. Ethan stood up and looked out the window toward the main hall. He could see Lena moving between tables, smiling as she worked. Then it's time to bring it back, he said softly. Collins straightened up. What would you like me to do, sir? Ethan smiled. For now, nothing. I'll handle it personally. He turned toward the door but paused before leaving. And Collins. Thank Lena for reminding me what real service looks like. Back in the bar, Lena noticed Ethan standing near the counter again, watching the room with a thoughtful expression. He looked different now, stronger, calmer, and somehow familiar. When their eyes met, Ethan smiled kindly. Lena, he said, can you come to the office for a moment when you're free? She blinked in surprise. The office? Did I do something wrong? Ethan shook his head gently. No, you did everything right. And though she didn't understand what he meant, she nodded politely and went back to serving customers. But inside, she couldn't stop wondering, who exactly was this man? Why did his words sound like something much bigger was coming? She didn't know it yet. But tomorrow would change everything. The next morning, the bar was quiet before opening time. The chairs were still stacked and the air smelled of fresh polish and coffee beans. Lena arrived early as usual, tying her apron and humming softly. She didn't know that today would be unlike any other. As she cleaned the tables, she noticed something strange. The manager, Mr. Collins, looked nervous. He kept glancing toward the office door. When she asked if everything was all right, he simply said, Mr. Ethan wants to see you in his office when you're done. She frowned slightly. Mr. Ethan? Yes, he said, forcing a smile. You'll understand when you meet him. Lena nodded, though confusion filled her mind. She didn't know anyone named Ethan. Maybe it was a new supervisor or an investor. She brushed the thought aside and continued working until the clock struck 10. Inside the office, Ethan Cross stood near the window, watching the sunlight creep through the blinds. He wore a calm expression, but inside his heart was heavy with emotion. For days he had seen the best and worst sides of his staff. But one person, Lena, had restored his faith in everything he once believed about kindness and humanity. He turned as he heard a soft knock on the door. Come in, he said gently. Lena entered. A little nervous, her hands folded neatly. You wanted to see me, sir? Yes, Ethan said, smiling faintly. Please have a seat. She sat across from him, still unsure why she was there. Did I do something wrong? She asked carefully. Ethan shook his head. No, Lena, quite the opposite. Her confusion deepened. Then why am I here? Ethan took a deep breath. Do you remember a few days ago? A man who came here wearing an old jacket and ordered just coffee and a sandwich? Lena blinked, surprised. Of course. You mean the kind man who forgot his wallet? Ethan smiled softly. Yes, that man. She tilted her head. What about him? Ethan's voice lowered, calm but clear. That man was me. Lena's eyes widened. She stared at him for a few seconds as if trying to understand the words. You? She whispered. But how? You look so different now, he nodded. Because back then I was testing something. I wanted to see how my staff treated people when they didn't know who was watching. Lena blinked rapidly, her heart racing. Wait, your staff? You mean... Ethan smiled gently. Yes, Lena, I'm the owner of this bar. My name is Ethan Cross. For a moment, silence filled the room. Lena's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She felt her heartbeat in her chest fast and hard. You're the owner? She finally managed to say, her voice shaking. All this time you were... pretending. Ethan nodded softly. Yes. I wanted to see how people here really behave when no one's pretending to watch them. I came as a poor customer, someone invisible. And I saw everything. Lena looked down, embarrassed. Oh my, I had no idea, sir. I'm sorry if I said or did anything wrong. Ethan smiled warmly. You didn't do anything wrong, Lena. In fact, you did everything right. She looked up, confused. Right? Yes, Ethan said firmly. When others looked at me with judgment, you looked at me with kindness. When others ignored me, you spoke to me with respect. And when I said I couldn't pay, you offered to help without hesitation. Her eyes softened. It wasn't a big thing, sir. It was just coffee and a sandwich. He shook his head slowly. No, Lena, it wasn't the food, it was your heart. You showed me that kindness still exists in this place, even when the world forgets it. Lena felt tears forming, but she quickly blinked them away. I didn't know you were testing anyone, she said quietly. I just thought you needed a little help. Ethan smiled. And that's exactly what makes it special. You didn't do it for reward. You did it because it was right. He reached into his desk drawer and took out an envelope, sliding it across the table toward her. I want you to have this. Lena looked at it but didn't move. What is it? Something small, Ethan said softly. A thank you for reminding me what kindness looks like. She hesitated before opening it. Inside was a letter with the company seal, and something she never expected. It was a promotion letter, naming her as assistant manager along with a bonus large enough to change her life. Her hands trembled. Sir, I can't accept this. You can, Ethan said kindly. Because you earned it. She shook her head in disbelief. But I was just doing my job. Ethan stood and walked around the desk. You did more than your job. You treated a stranger with humanity when others didn't. That's what I built this business on, and that's what I almost lost sight of. He looked at her with genuine gratitude. Thank you for reminding me, Lena. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she smiled shyly. Thank you, sir. I don't know what to say. Just keep being who you are, he said softly. That's enough. As she stood to leave, Ethan stopped her gently. One more thing, he said. Don't tell the others yet. I want to speak to them myself tomorrow. But remember this, you've made a difference here. She nodded, still overwhelmed. I will, sir. As she walked out of the office, her heart felt light, her steps almost floating. For the first time in years, someone had seen her, not as a waitress, not as a worker, but as a person who mattered. Ethan watched her go, a smile spreading across his face. He had walked into his own bar pretending to be poor and left richer than ever, not in money, but in lessons. And in that quiet moment, Ethan knew one truth with absolute certainty. Kindness never goes unnoticed, it just waits for the right eyes to see it. The next morning, the bar was brighter than usual. The staff arrived early, whispering to one another, unaware that something special was about to happen. The soft scent of roasted beans filled the air as sunlight streamed through the large glass windows, lighting up the tables where hundreds of stories had unfolded. Lena walked in quietly, still processing what had happened the previous day. Her hands trembled slightly as she tied her apron. The letter from Mr. Ethan Cross was safely folded inside her bag. She had read it several times that night, still unable to believe it. Assistant manager. She smiled softly at the thought but quickly pushed it away. It's too good to be true. she whispered to herself. Maybe he'll change his mind. But deep down, a tiny spark of hope flickered. As the doors opened to customers, Lena began her usual routine, serving coffee, greeting regulars, and checking on tables. Nothing about her behavior had changed. She was still the same kind, humble woman who treated every person equally. Only one thing was different now. Ethan was watching closely, not as a stranger, but as someone who deeply respected her. Later that morning, Ethan arrived quietly, dressed in a simple but elegant suit. The staff straightened their backs when they saw him. Some whispered, wondering who this important-looking man was, but Lena knew. Her heart raced when she saw him, though she tried not to show it. He smiled gently as their eyes met. "Good morning, Lena," he said warmly. "Good morning, sir," she replied, still unsure how to act. Ethan could sense her nervousness. "Relax," he said kindly. "You're doing great." She nodded, blushing slightly, and returned to her work. As the hours passed, Ethan quietly observed. He noticed how Lena managed to balance everything. The rush of customers, the careless behavior of a few waiters, even the small mistakes others made. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she helped calmly, with patience that amazed everyone around her. He realized then that kindness was not weakness, it was strength. When the lunch crowd settled down, Ethan stood near the counter and called out gently, "Everyone, may I have your attention, please?" The entire bar grew silent. Forks stopped clinking, and the music seemed to fade in the background. The staff turned toward him, unsure what was happening. The manager, Mr. Collins, straightened his tie nervously. "Everyone listen to Mr. Cross," he said quickly. At the sound of that name, confusion rippled through the room. "Mr. Cross?" whispered one of the waiters. "Isn't that the owner?" Ethan smiled. "Yes," he said calmly. "My name is Ethan Cross. I'm the founder and owner of this bar." Gasps filled the room. Everyone froze in shock, including Lena, even though she already knew the truth. Ethan continued. "A few days ago, I came here not as your boss, but as a simple man, someone who wanted to see how this place truly worked when no one was watching." The staff exchanged uneasy looks. Some shifted uncomfortably, remembering their past behavior. "I was treated in many ways," Ethan said gently, his tone neither angry nor harsh. "Some ignored me, some whispered. But one person, just one, treated me with kindness, respect, and honesty, even when she thought I had nothing." His eyes turned to Lena. She froze, her heart pounding as everyone followed his gaze. "That person," Ethan said with a smile, "is Lena." A wave of surprise went through the staff. Lena's hands covered her mouth as her eyes filled with tears. Ethan walked closer to her. "When I told her I couldn't pay for my meal, she didn't mock me, she didn't turn me away. She offered to help out of pure kindness. She reminded me why I started this business, to serve people with heart, not just to make money." Lena wiped her eyes, whispering, "I was just doing what felt right, sir." Ethan smiled softly. "And that's exactly why it matters." He turned to the rest of the staff. "I want every one of you to remember this. True service is not about how rich or poor a person looks. It's about treating everyone with dignity. If we forget that, we lose the soul of this place." The room stayed silent, every face reflecting guilt, respect, or awe. Then, Ethan looked back at Lena. "Lena, step forward, please." She hesitated, trembling slightly, then took a small step forward. Ethan reached into his pocket and held out a small envelope, the same kind he had given her before. "Lena," he said with pride in his voice, "you're officially promoted to assistant manager of this bar." The staff gasped again, clapping slowly at first, then louder. Tears rolled down Lena's cheeks as she covered her face in disbelief. "Sir, I don't deserve this." "You do," Ethan said softly. "You've earned it through your heart." He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "From today, you'll help me lead this place, not just with rules, but with kindness." She nodded, unable to speak through her tears. The applause faded into smiles and laughter. Even those who had judged her before came forward to congratulate her. The atmosphere felt lighter, warmer, almost reborn. Later, when the crowd quieted, Ethan said one last thing. Let this be a lesson to all of us. You never know who's sitting at your table or what story they carry. Sometimes one small act of kindness can change everything. Lena smiled through her tears. Thank you, sir, for believing in kindness again. Ethan returned the smile. No, Lena, thank you for reminding me of it. That night, as the lights dimmed and the bar closed, Lena stood by the window, watching the streetlights glow. For the first time, she felt proud, not just of her promotion, but of the way she had stayed true to herself. She whispered softly, kindness really does come back. And somewhere behind her, Ethan smiled to himself as he turned off the last light, knowing that the heart of his bar was finally beating again. A week had passed since the day Lena was promoted. Yet the feeling of that moment still echoed inside the bar like a soft melody that refused to fade. The place looked the same from the outside, wooden doors, warm lights, and golden letters spelling Cross Cafe. But inside, something had changed. The air felt lighter now. The smiles were real. The laughter of customers sounded warmer, not forced. And at the heart of it all was Lena, once a simple waitress, now the assistant manager, leading with kindness instead of authority. Every morning, she arrived early, checking every corner of the cafe before opening time. She made sure the coffee machines worked, the chairs were polished, and the flowers on each table were fresh. But more than that, she made sure the people who worked there felt valued. She remembered how Ethan once told her, kindness builds bridges. Now she lived by that every single day. On one busy afternoon, a man walked in wearing torn clothes. His hair was messy and his hands shook slightly as he held a few coins. Some customers stared, others whispered quietly, just as they once had when Ethan came disguised. Before anyone could react, Lena walked up to him with her gentle smile. Good afternoon, sir, she said softly. Would you like a seat by the window? The man looked surprised. I don't have enough money, he said shyly. That's okay, Lena replied kindly. You can still sit, maybe just a cup of water to start with? He nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. Ethan, who had been sitting in the corner that day, watched the scene unfold. It was as if time had rewound itself. But this time, someone else was receiving the same kindness he once did. He smiled quietly, his heart full. Lena had learned the lesson, and now she was spreading it. As days turned into weeks, business at Cross Cafe began to grow again. But this time, it wasn't because of new advertisements or fancy menus. It was because people felt something different when they came in. They felt seen, heard, cared for. A woman who often came after work told Ethan one day, Your cafe feels peaceful. The staff here treat me like family. Ethan smiled proudly. That's Lena's doing, he said. Word began to spread around town about the cafe that didn't just serve food, it served kindness. Customers who had once stopped coming returned. New faces arrived daily, curious about the place that everyone spoke of with warmth. And each time someone complimented the service, Lena would smile and say, It's all thanks to Mr. Cross. He believed in kindness again. But Ethan knew better. He often watched quietly from a distance, thinking, No, Lena, it was you who reminded me. One evening, when the cafe was closing, Ethan called Lena to the office again. She walked in, smiling, politely, though she always felt a little nervous being called there. Sir, did something happen? She asked softly. Ethan shook his head, smiling. Nothing bad. I just wanted to talk. He gestured for her to sit. It's been a month since your promotion. Tell me honestly, how do you feel? Lena thought for a moment. Grateful, she said finally, and proud. Not because of the title, but because I get to make others smile. Ethan nodded. You've done more than I ever expected. The customers love this place again. The staff respect each other now. You've brought back the heart that this business lost. Lena's cheeks flushed. Thank you, sir. But it's really your example that guides me. Ethan chuckled softly. My example? You mean the poor man who forgot his wallet? They both laughed, but then Ethan grew serious. You know, Lena, when I first came in pretending to be broke, I thought I was testing others, but the truth is, life was testing me. She looked at him curiously. Testing you, sir? Yes, he said quietly, to see if I still understood what truly mattered. For years I chased success. I thought kindness was something nice but not necessary. Then you came along and proved me wrong. Lena's eyes softened. Sometimes the smallest things show the biggest truths, she said gently. Ethan nodded, his smile full of pride. Exactly. Outside, the rain began to fall softly against the windows, filling the cafe with a calming rhythm. Ethan looked out, then turned back to her. Lena, he said, I want you to remember this. The world will always need more people like you. People who care even when no one's watching. Lena smiled, her eyes shining with quiet tears. I'll never forget that, sir. He handed her a small golden badge engraved with the cafe's logo and her name beneath it. Lena, assistant manager. This isn't just a title, he said. It's a symbol of what this place stands for. She held the badge close to her chest, whispering, Thank you, sir, for believing in me. Ethan smiled warmly. No, Lena. Thank you for teaching me how to believe again. Months later, the story of the kind waitress who changed her boss's heart spread far beyond their city. Reporters wrote small articles about the cafe. Visitors from other towns came just to see the place where kindness became policy. But for Ethan and Lena, fame didn't matter. What mattered was that people walked in sad and left smiling. One evening, as Ethan closed the doors, he looked around the cafe, now glowing softly under warm lights, and whispered to himself, This is what success looks like. Lena, stacking cups behind the counter, smiled when she heard him. What's that, sir? He turned to her and said with a grin, Success isn't about how much we earn. It's about how much good we leave behind. She nodded. And kindness, she added softly, always finds its way back. Ethan looked at her proudly. Always. And as the lights went off and the cafe grew quiet, both of them knew that their story wasn't just about coffee or a job or a test. It was about a truth that would last forever. When you lead with kindness, you never lose.